You will have access to you will have access to the recordings, the transcripts, and all of that before we publish it, as well as being able to look at the article just so that we can reflect the Latino Community Fund the best we can.
Awesome, thank you.
So, were you able to take a look at the questions I sent out?
No, I saw the email that I saw had the link. Oh, gotcha. It was on the document. Okay, I did not, but it's okay. I'll answer everything the best that I can.
Yeah, it's fine. It's completely okay. It was just out of just so we don't get you out of surprise or anything.
I understand. I appreciate it.
So the first question would be, Latina Republic is based in California, and so the community and government support is not going to be the same as it is in Georgia. How does civic engagement and community support differ in Georgia than it would in a more immigrant-friendly state like California?
Well, I would start with kind of just highlighting the obvious, which is just the policies that we have to deal with in the state. I want to start with, we are an English only state. However, there is one county in the state, Gwinnett County, that does comply with federal law. Federal law says that if there is a population more of that, reaches a certain threshold, I believe it's 10%, you must offer essential government documents in the language that is spoken by the population. In the 2010 census in Gwinnett County, that was the Latino community. And they only decided to comply with this because there was a lawsuit. So we have to constantly fight for what are our legal rights. So that the Georgia government will comply. And then on top of that, we also have a lot of policies that are passed that are not immigrant friendly. Many policies, for example, like when it comes to, for example, immigrants to drive, that one's a really, really bad one here in the state of Georgia. And so constantly, like when it comes to our community, there's just fear of participating. There's constant fear of voting or having your voice be heard, testifying, etc. But that doesn't necessarily stop a lot of people. I'm sure with other states where there's just more friendly policies, people are more encouraged to engage, people are more encouraged to go out and vote, have their voice be heard, testify. Here, not so much. We have to work harder and give people that extra push so that they can participate.
Yeah, thank you. I definitely see what you mean about Gwinnett. I mean, it's very diverse. And last week I worked on the article about Stewart detention, and to see that county in particular and act so much in like community support for immigrants compared to somewhere like Gwinnett, just the Metro Atlanta area is very different.
Yes, it is very, very different. I mean, I think like Metro Atlanta, the Atlanta area, which is, I'm also located in that area, versus rural. Yeah, you notice a difference, especially with relationships with diversity and just how immigrants feel. And immigrants, I'm an immigrant, I'm a first generation immigrant, but I mean, I am eligible to vote. The relationship is very different, and people turn out differently for sure, if you look at rural versus metro and city area.
Yeah, thank you for your response. That actually kind of ties in with my next question, which is this newer generation of young people is very driven towards social change and human rights. Are there programs that the Latino Community Fund offers to help anyone interested know where to start?
For sure. So we really focus on voter education being a C3. We do not support any particular party or anything like that. All of our work is educational work, and we register people to vote. There is a noticeable gap, for example, for our first generation folks whose parents, for example, were not eligible to vote or didn't necessarily grow up in the system where they participated, not because they didn't want to, but because they simply weren't eligible. First generation folks who are eligible to vote don't necessarily have the resources or grew with the example of being civically engaged. That's where we come in. With our campaigns, we constantly strive to really educate the Latino community to fill those voids. So everything from how to register to vote to how to find your polling place to checking your voter registration. Here in Georgia, we're famous for voter purging.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are infamous for voter purging. Infamous would be a better word. And now with the new voting laws, it made it all more difficult because now the information that we gave them at the beginning of the year is different than what we're giving them now towards the middle and the end of the year. And this is just because things are changing so vastly in the state due to, the state flipping. So we always try to really focus on the voids that we are dealing with as a community, try to not only encourage, but also give people the tools. I think what you say is true. Younger generations do want to participate more, but they also get overwhelmed with the system. They don't know where to start. We don't know. And when things get overwhelming, you kind of just, turn the other cheek and just move on with life because there are other things to do. So we just try to provide and make this information as easy and accessible as possible, make it language accessible as well, and just try to make it as simple as possible so that people don't get too overwhelmed with the first steps of civic engagement, especially with the younger folks.
Mm-hmm. Right, sounds good. Thank you. The third question would be kind of what we touched on earlier, the laws regarding higher education, driver's license, even healthcare. How has the Latino Community Fund been able to kind of combat these issues, both like at a government level and a local level?
Right. So with our programs, we constantly are training people to learn how to testify, to register to vote so they can go out and vote. And so that we have a presence in the policy space, not only in the ballot box, right, but also in the policy space. There are coalitions such as the Freedom to Drive. We would love to see policy passed like Illinois, right? Illinois, anybody can go and get a license and just have permission to drive. This advocates for safer roads, make sure that everybody that is driving knows and understands all the road policies and rules and how to drive safely. We are advocating for that. And a bill, a Freedom to Drive bill, is presented every single year. And we try to get as many people to go and testify and support this bill as possible. However, we do have a majority at the state level where they just do not support this kind of policy. So we have switched, the Latino community has switched to the local level. So we're talking district attorneys, we're talking city councils, so much that I believe it was Cobb County. I believe it was Cobb County, not Gwinnett County. Pretty sure it's actually Cobb County. They overturn a policy like 287G, which was the policy that I mentioned earlier. Very heavy limitations in driver's license. And it basically made it so that any kind of driving incident, if you pass a stop sign, if you don't stop at a red light when you're going to turn right, that becomes a criminal offense. And it's definitely targeted towards the Latino community. It also allows so that police directly works with ICE if somebody is pulled over and undocumented. But in Cobb County, what happened was that we elected, or there was, a person was elected, a district attorney was elected, or a sheriff was elected, better, to overturn this kind of policy that made the streets more dangerous. It made a very hostile community. People were scared to drive. They didn't want to get deported because they didn't stop at a stop sign, right? Or anything, and get into a car accident, anything was a risk.
Mhm.
Essentially, what the Latino community really tried to focus at the community level, given that at the state level, it's a bit more difficult to pass those kinds of policies.
Yes, absolutely. Do you work with organizations that also reach out to like more parts of Southern Georgia?
Yeah, so LCF Georgia, we have started reaching out to other parts of Georgia, like Tifton. We do work there. And then we work with Migrant Equity Southeast. They work in Savannah. So yeah, and with Georgia, there's a lot of coalition work. C3 space. I mean, it's constant coalitions. So yes, there are people throughout the state, but as far as when it comes to immigrant-led, Latino-led, yeah, we do have a couple of organizations that we work with that work in South Georgia.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. So for the 2020 presidential election and the local government election prior to that, I know that the LCF social media was really talking about the mass voter registration. And I mean, that election proved to be one of the most successful in terms of new voters. What was that experience like? And actually, what were the most common questions that LCF was asked by new voters?
So, given the pandemic, we really had to flip the script very quickly. And we found that one of the most efficient ways to register people to vote was reaching them either through phone or through text or through virtual means. It was very difficult because we had to do a lot of outreach to the community in virtual spaces and not necessarily get those questions back, right? In a social media setting, people will click on the link and stuff, but really who comment is a very fraction, is a big fraction of people who actually click on the link. So when it came to questions that we had so far, it was a lot of questions that were related to a lot of misinformation, a lot of vote by mail questions, a lot of later on election fraud questions, shouting and saying, this is what I think, not necessarily even a question. But we also get a lot of questions of just simple logistical questions. When is the date for XYZ? Where do we go to vote? A lot of know your rights votes, right? People don't really understand that they have a right to a translator and they can take a translator to the polls and let it be their friend. We actually have an election protection program where we send volunteers out in places ready to translate for anybody who needs that kind of service. So it's a lot of that. And then we also get a lot of questions of first generation immigrants or immigrants themselves saying, do I have to be a citizen to vote? Do I, can I vote as a resident? We always make it very clear that you do have to be a citizen to be able to vote. And again, I think these questions generate from a lot of misinformation. It really takes over a lot of space and questions that are being asked and not necessarily focusing on the information that really matters, which is like, the times the polling locations are open or how do I go and vote or how do I get my voter ID? No, a lot of the questions are, are vote by mail ballots safe? I heard that there's a lot of immigrants registering to vote when that's not true. Nobody's registering any kind of, people who happen to be undocumented to vote. Nobody's doing it. It doesn't exist. But people are asking, am I eligible? They're saying that they're registering a bunch of illegal, undocumented immigrants, blah, blah, blah. No, that doesn't exist. So a lot of that takes up a lot of space. especially here in Georgia where people are so vulnerable to that kind of information.
Most definitely, yes. I know you touched a little bit on the Know Your Rights programs that LCF offers. Could you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so a couple of things that we really focus on is know your rights. So know the fact that anybody who doesn't speak English actually has the right to a translator, and they can take anybody as long as they are not their boss or their union leader. We do have a lot of people who are naturalized citizens, and it's such an exciting place to be where somebody comes up and says, "I'm voting for the first time, and I'm 50 years old." Just turned to a citizen. It's very exciting, but they say, "I just don't know how to speak English, so I don't know, and I'm not going to go vote because I don't know how to speak English." And then I tell them, "Well, if you have a daughter, son, anybody who's willing to translate for you, please do that, or where is your polling location? Maybe we'll have a volunteer go with you." So we do have the election protection program, which is just volunteers that are standing outside of the polling place just like a monitor would, or just like any kind of C3 volunteer would. And we offer translating services for anybody who needs them and that are readily available, because even though you do have a right to a translator here in the state of Georgia, the county is not necessarily obligated to provide that. The only county that does have ballots in Spanish and must have ballots in Spanish is Gwinnett County. Other than that, nobody else is obligated to provide language accessible ballots. So, and I know that that's very different in other states. I wish that was, but it's not. And then other things like the right to a provisional ballot. Now, with the new voting laws, there has been a lot of rigorous regulation with the provisional ballots. It used to be that you were, you have the right to a provisional ballot if you are not at the right polling location. Now you have to be within your precinct. You have to be within your assigned polling location to vote provisional ballot. So that has changed, and just knowing that. And then also just knowing that, if you are in line by 7 p.m. or by the time the polling location closes, you have the right to vote. So just little things here and there, or big things here and there, where if you are turned away because you don't know how to speak English, because you're at the wrong polling place, because you're in line and the polling location is closed, you have the right. You have to know your rights and know exactly what to do in those kinds of situations, so that your vote is so you can eventually vote, and then for that vote to be counted.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have I would say, like, the undocumented version of Know Your Rights? Because I know in Georgia it's very easy to get caught up in a legal situation, and oftentimes a lot of undocumented people will not know that they even have certain rights simply because of their status in Georgia.
Yeah, so worked with Asian Americans advancing justice in this kind of work. So, one thing is knowing your rights as a voter, which is really the space that I work in. But then, of course, there's know your rights in case, a police officer knocks on your door, or in case you get pulled over, what are your rights? Yeah, we have created kind of like these business card size cards that people can just hold. They're language accessible. What to do if an officer knocks on your door. You don't have to open the door. You do not have to speak. You do not have to give any kind of details, right? Those kinds of things. So yes, we have worked on different spaces of know your rights, because yes, what you're pointing out is true. It's not only voting rights, it's knowing your rights in many different facets.
Absolutely, yes. I love the card idea, though. It's definitely something very important. I mean, especially because of the driving laws. Number one most important thing you can carry along with identification of any kind.
Well, that, and then yeah, it's good to just have it in your wallet, because quite frankly, unfortunately, you just don't know when those kinds of situations happen. I mean, I lived in a a mixed status family, and yes, we did have officers come to our house. This was back in 2000s, when 2001, after 9/11, immigration got really intense. We would have loved to have that kind of information, because my dad did open the door and it didn't go well. So if that kind of outreach existed before, maybe a lot, things would have been a lot more different. But now I'm happy to say that things have changed and this kind of outreach exists. So.
Thank you for your answer. That was really well. Georgia is known for its anti-immigrant laws and Governor Brian Kemp's anti-immigrant campaign. What strategies does the Latino Community Fund specifically use to educate, empower, and protect these vulnerable immigrant groups on top of the voter registration and your rights campaigns?
Well, first and foremost, it's really important for us to have the facts because policy is very broad and it can be interpreted in many ways. We battle a lot of misinformation targeting our Latino community. So one, it's really just combating the misinformation. Two, it's really, again, simplifying this kind of language and policy and making it easy and understandable and language accessible to the Latino community here in the state of Georgia. That's also one of our strategies. And then three, not being scared to have these kinds of conversations. It's very important to be in spaces where mixed status families, undocumented folks feel safe to have these kind of conversations. It's not easy to somebody to stand up and say, I'm undocumented. I just need to know what do I do if an officer, XYZ or this happens or that happens. It's very difficult for a mom to, be in a space of 20, 30 people and say, hey, this is what's going on. So really creating safe spaces for that. And then also just going where they're at. There are certain areas in Georgia, or let's say, community malls, all that stuff. Give this information out in the way that I said, the business card with the information there, a flyer, having in language accessible websites so that people can get that. And then not only that, but now with COVID, for example, LCF Georgia, we have had a vaccine program. Actually hit the 10,000 mark, vaccinating of 10,000 Georgians and immigrants here in the state.
That's amazing.
Right, but through those programs, when people get vaccinated, they'll get their voter information. They'll also get their know your rights information, and vice versa. I mean, when we're out there, registering people to vote, same thing happens. So just make sure that and understanding that once you have the attention of somebody, make the most of it, and we really do try to do that.
Beautiful. Yes, absolutely. Now, this will be the last question, and we like to ask it to every organization because it really hits close to home. Many people often talk about immigrants struggling to survive in hostile states. Why do they not just move to friendlier states? Why do you stay in Georgia? And what makes Georgia home for you and others like you?
That is a loaded question. Well, let's start with why people stay here. Georgia is a beautiful state. There's a lot of jobs here, and it's constantly developing. So that makes it, I know that's one of the biggest reasons why we moved here when I was young, and I think it was probably 96, 97, when I moved to the state. So, and obviously my parents being undocumented. So it's really just how fruitful the economy is here in the state of Georgia, how it's growing, and how I think like the international airport that we have contributes to that, constant development that contributes to that. So yeah, there's definitely that. Unfortunately, policies aren't as friendly to our community. We're constantly targeted, and even driving to work is such a hassle here.
Absolutely.
Why don't they move to other states? I have honestly, I have known a lot of people who have moved to other states, especially documented folks who definitely want to go to school. Here, school for documented folks are super, super expensive. They have to state, and then on top of that, they have to pay cash up front. It's not like they have access to any kind of Hope scholarships or anything like that here. So it's not to say that people don't move to other states. People definitely do move to other states, but a lot of folks stay here because one, yes, like I mentioned, our economy, but two, their families are here, their community is here. They've already moved from their own country and have already experienced culture shock and having to start all over. So when you work so hard and you create a home here and you create a community here, leaving that is very difficult. Wanting to do that again is just not always an option for a lot of folks. We also have a great education system when it comes to college, Hope scholarships, and opportunities for their kids. I know my parents stayed here because, and they sent me back here was because of the opportunities that I had as a citizen. It's not always about them.
Mm-hmm.
Is as like, for example, if your parents aren't documented, they aren't necessarily thinking about themselves or thinking about the opportunity for their kids as well. Here we have best scholarships in the country, like Hope and Zell and all those things. And so, yeah. And why do I call it home? Georgia, I mean, I grew up here, and even though maybe other states don't see us through the best eyes, but Georgia has its beautiful diversity in the metro area and even in the rural area. There's so much community. There are areas where I can go and eat food from like that I feel like was cooked for my grandma. There is so many things about Georgia that is just so beautiful. And not only that, but we are changing. There is hope for the future. I think when it comes to this kind of approach in policy and change in policy, things are changing here in the state of Georgia. So, I completely understand when people move out. I know people that moved out, but I also understand people who want to stay. Because, I mean, Georgia is home for a lot of us. And again, like you're thinking more of the future of your kids. I mean, my parents, immigrants usually move here is not because, they also want a better future for themselves, but they also want a better future for future generations.
Absolutely.
A lot of immigrants, Georgia is it for them. So, and that's a personal decision.
No, I love your answer, especially with, it seems like most immigrant families are mixed status families. I know for mine it was. And, I had that debate with myself, why stay in Georgia? I'm undocumented and in higher education. Like there are a few loopholes, so many people aren't going to know how to do it. So it's always that thought of just moving to a different state where it's probably easier and friendlier just to be undocumented in the United States. Right.
For sure. I mean, Georgia isn't that state yet. Hopefully that will change
Absolutely.
later.
Right. Thank you so much for your time. You were so lovely to talk to.
No, thank you, Flor. I appreciate your time as well. Were you able to get a hold of Genesis so you can talk about our COVID programs?
Yes, thank you so much for referring her to me. I will meet with her next week. So I look forward to asking her about the COVID relief from the Latino Community Fund.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Flor. I'll talk to you soon.
Have a good one.
You as well. Bye-bye.